Well, hello, it's Debbie Gilbert again with I Got Communities, and today I'm here with Dennis Gibbs. He is the associate pastor of the Calvary Baptist Church, and he's also a veteran. And this being Veterans Week, we're trying to do everything we can to hear people's stories about what led them into military service and a little of their experience and what they're doing since they have left that service. So, welcome. Thanks for agreeing to be with us today. So, just how did you decide military?
Well, it's an interesting story. I guess when I was a child, I kind of always I enjoyed playing Army, as most young boys do, I think. And as I grew older, I kind of always thought in the back of my mind that one day I'd kind of like to be a soldier. And when I was in high school, my junior year of high school, I think, senior year, some friends of mine were actually talking about joining the Marine Corps. They'd been talking with the recruiter, and they were like, "Hey, you should come with us." And I'm like, I don't know if I want to be a Marine. They're pretty hardcore. But I started talking with the Army recruiter. They would come to school and talk. Anyway, I struck up a friendship with the local Army recruiter, and they had some programs that kind of really interested me, some things that I thought I might like to try. Only problem was you had to be 18 to join. I was only 17. And so in order for me to join, I was going to have parental permission. And so I asked my grandfather, who was my legal guardian at that time, if he would sign for me. And the reason I was living with my grandparents was when I was 8 years old, my mother, father, and two of my brothers were all killed in a traffic accident. And that's how I came to Kentucky. My maternal grandparents took me and my younger brother, who survived the accident. And so we lived with them for a few years. Mm-hmm. And so I needed to have his signature. And I remember he told me, he said, if this is something you really think you want to do, he said, and I want you to make sure that you want to do this, he said, I'll sign for you. And I had thought about it quite a bit, and I thought, yes, it's something. I knew I wasn't ready to go on to college at that time. Mm-hmm. I felt I needed something to maybe help me grow, maybe mature a little bit more. And I felt at that time the military would be a good way to do that, maybe see some of the world, mm-hmm. travel, and learn something new. So he signed, and off I went to begin my career.
So do you remember your first day?
I do.
Tell me about that.
I think most everybody remembers that first day. It was a little strange. We were at. They took us to Louisville, and we went through the processing station there, and then they put us on a bus for Fort Knox. We got there about 1 o'clock in the morning, and they took us into this barracks, and they said, pick a bunk and get some sleep, and then we'll see you in the morning. And they weren't kidding. About 4 hours later, they come in beating the garbage can lids and all this stuff. Get out of your bed, and everybody went to fall outside. And it was there were several other people there at that time, mm-hmm. and we didn't know anybody. So we're all kind of mass confusion, but it was very chaotic. I was literally scared to death. I thought, what have I got myself into? But thankfully, we had some good instructors, good sergeants that showed us the way to go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you were in the Army Division.
I was in the Army,
because you wanted to be a soldier.
Yes.
Okay. So can you just kind of take me through a timeline of how many years did you serve?
I actually spent 23 years.
23 years.
Yes.
Okay. So can you take me through kind of just a timeline of people, places, and things, and where were you? What did you do? And
I started my training at Fort Knox. I went into the armor branch, tanks, for those that may not know. People said, well, you're crazy. Who'd want to be a tanker? I'm like, me. It just seemed to be very exciting, but we did all our training, our basic training, and then our advanced individual training was all done at Fort Knox. It was a 13-week course, very, very arduous course, very hard. And I done quite well. I actually graduated as the outstanding graduate of my company. I was promoted. I had an accelerated promotion of a couple ranks, and was very thankful to have had that opportunity. But after Fort Knox, my first duty assignment was at Fort Riley, Kansas, with the 1st Infantry Division. And so I spent about 17 months there. And I learned some things and began, accumulating knowledge, mm-hmm. and learning how to be a soldier, and becoming more proficient at my MOS, my military occupational specialty or skill. And after 17 months, I came down on orders to go overseas, which I had actually indicated at one time. The kind of back then they would send you where they wanted to, but you could, if you had a preference. And I had kind of indicated that I would like to go overseas, and so I had orders to go to Germany. And so I came home. I had a few days leave and saw some of my friends for a while. But anyway, boarded a plane and went to Germany. So I spent about 24 months there in Wiesbaden, which is just down below Frankfurt, Germany, right on the Rhine River. Very beautiful place.
Were you about 20 then?
I was actually 18, going on 19, I think. Yeah. And was a big, exciting time for a young man who never really traveled far. I mean, in the States a few times. The first time I'd ever been out of the country. And like I said, beautiful place. But again, I was assigned to an Army unit, and we trained hard. And this was during the period of the Cold War. This was in the mid-'70s. I went to Germany in 78 and was there until the latter part of 1980. And the Cold War was going on. The Soviet Union was very powerful at that time. Western Europe was... there was a lot of things going on there. Our commitment, the United States commitment to NATO forces was to defend Western Europe in case of a Soviet aggression or Warsaw Pact aggression at that time. So, and we did a lot of our duties took us up on the border. If you remember, this time the Berlin Wall was still very active. And there was an actual border known as the Iron Curtain that divided East Germany from West Germany. Czechoslovakia and some of those countries were on the other side, the Warsaw Pact side. And we got an opportunity to go up and patrol the border several times, and we could actually see some of the people, some of the villages on the other side of the border. You could actually see through binoculars how those villages and communities were set up, and it was very dismal. It was very harsh, and I don't think people in this country truly understood the freedoms that we had here. When you look at how other people on a socialist or communist country, what they had to endure, what they lived through. So it's a very eye-opening experience for me, a very growing time. But that was a big part of our duties, and of course we trained hard. But thankfully, there were incidents off and on along the border, but things worked out well. And so like I said, I spent roughly about 24 months there, and was coming up near the end of my time in service. And I had a decision to make. They'd been asking me if I wanted to re-enlist and maybe do another tour. And I thought seriously about doing that, and I actually wanted to go into a different field. I wanted to try to learn a different skill. And they actually couldn't make that happen. And I said, well, I guess I'll go home. And so my time ended. I came back to the States, and I ended my time on active service, and I came back to London. And I'd been home for just a few months, and some friends of mine were in the local National Guard unit. And they said, hey, you just got home. They said, you'd come check this out. And I'm like, I don't think I want to do that anymore. But they kept, and I said, well, okay. They said, you just come try it. So I said, oh, okay. I went by the Army one day, and I talked to some of the guys, and they had a little program called the Try One. You signed up for a year. And if you didn't like it, you only had a year, you could go back. So I did, and actually I enjoyed it. It was fun because we only did like 1 week in a month, a couple weeks in the summer, and that kind of thing. And so I spent the rest of my career with the National Guard and the Reserves. But during that time, they asked me if I would be interested in going to officer school, and I'm like, maybe. So, long story short, I did. I went to officer candidate school. I became an officer, got my commission. But I really enjoyed it, and the camaraderie and the friendships that I made were, most of those carry on even today.
So when you joined the Guards, were you here in Kentucky?
I was in Kentucky.
So did you always stay in Kentucky, or did you have to go do tours?
No, we actually would go to different places to train. We went to several areas in the States. There were some times we actually went out of the country and did some deployments and trainings with other groups, other nations, which again, very interesting. And for an old boy from Kentucky, is a great opportunity. And so I was very fortunate to have that. But again, the friendships that I made and the places that I was able to see and the things that I learned a lot of those things I still carry with me today.
Mm-hmm.
And so
I'm curious about one thing. You said you were encouraged to go to officer school,
yes,
and of course, that's leadership.
yes.
What did you learn there about great leadership?
I think the biggest thing I take away from that is that being a good leader is not about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It's about those that you lead, those that you
Mm-hmm.
serve. And I think the epitome of leadership is sacrificing yourself to serve and to help others. And that's one of the things that I try to carry on today. I learned very quickly that it's not about me, it's about others. And
Sure.
I think if we could learn that, if we'd all learn to show help and support to others, how much better off we'd all be. Not only
Sure.
personally, but also collectively as a society, you know.
Yeah.
So, and I think sometimes people think being a leader is all about, me. You know, I'm the leader. I'm in charge. Well, no, it's not. It's about service to others. I think.
Yeah. So you were in the Guards for how many years?
About 15 years.
So I guess in the middle of all of that, you got married.
I did. I met
Okay.
my wife.
You met your wife.
Yes.
I've heard that story a little bit. Why don't you share a little bit of that story?
Yeah. Well, Jennifer and I actually met at church. When I came out of active duty and I came back home, I hadn't always lived. I was a Christian, and I did attend church fairly regularly when I could, when the opportunity presented itself. And there were times when it wasn't always feasible, but I wasn't truly living as I should be as a Christian. But when I came home, I decided I had matured. And that was one of the things I really was hoping to do, was to grow and mature. And I think the military instilled discipline and motivation. And so I did have a good period of growth there. And when I come home, I realized that I just wasn't wanting or willing to go back and do the things that I'd done before. Those things were in the past. I realized that I actually wanted to settle down. I was hoping to find someone to get married. I'd like to have children. And so I got back into church and was going to Swiss Colonies, where I grew up at. And Jennifer had some friends there. Actually, one of her good friends was our organ player. And we were having a revival, and she came. They'd invited her to come to church. I was actually singing in the choir. Now, I don't sing, but I was singing in the choir.
Now that's commitment.
Yes. But I enjoyed it. But anyway, I saw this beautiful woman out there sitting next to our organ player's wife, and I was just thinking, "Wow, who is this? Who's this young lady?" I was captivated, actually. And I actually, people think it's funny. I said I'd been trying to get back into church, and I'd been praying a lot, and like, Lord, this is what I like. This is what I want. And it's kind of like the Lord spoke, and He said, "There's your wife." And I'm like, "What?" And He said, "There's your wife."
I believe that. I believe those things.
I believe that. And people think that's corny. I believe it with all my heart. It's like He said, "That's the woman you're going to marry." I'm like, "Okay." So how do we make this happen? I didn't even know this woman. And, long story short, after the service was over, I ran down. Terry's playing the organ. I said, "Who's that? Who's that woman?" And they were, "Oh, that's Jennifer or so and so." And I'm like, "Yeah, okay." Anyway, so I didn't know this, but as soon as they got in the car together, he's like, "Well, you never guess who's asking about you." And long story short, we connected and had our first date, which actually was at our Christmas dinner at the London Armory.
Wow.
Well, that was our second date. That Saturday night, I guess I'd asked her out. We went to a ball game and we went to Pizza Hut and everything. But I said, "We're having this little dinner at the Armory tomorrow." I said, "Would you like to go with me?" And she's like, "Oh, yeah, sure, I can do that." So I said, "I'll pick you up." So we go and have our meeting, and then they release us to go pick up our wives and girlfriends and families, come back for our Christmas dinner. And I was in my uniform. Well, Sunday dinner at Jennifer's house, and I didn't know this, was family. They all come together. Mother would fix a big meal and everybody would eat. So here I show up, I knock on the door, I come in, I'm in my uniform, and they're all like, "Well, who's this guy? What's going on here?" And she's like, "Oh, well, we're going to dinner." So, but as fate would have it, the Lord worked things out. And
Well, that brings me to another question that I've not really asked anybody else who's been a veteran, and I should have, but I know that lots of people in military are married, and lots of times they have to go away for
Yes.
anywhere from 2 weeks to 2 years or longer,
Yes.
and they have family and children. How do you navigate that as far as a military person? How did that work for you being in the reserves?
There were times when I would be gone for weeks, even months at a time, and it's difficult. And again, people I don't think understand how hard it can be on a military family, especially when you have children, young children. They don't understand why daddy has to be away or mommy has to be away today. A lot of women in the military today. And I think you give up a lot, that you make a lot of concessions, you make a lot of compromises. There was a lot of missed anniversaries, a lot of missed birthdays, special event things, times you wished you could be there, but again, it goes back to service, and your duty as a soldier is to go where you're called upon to go, even if it means being separated from your family for long or extended periods. And so it's a harsh reality, but it's one that I think is necessary in order to provide the security that our country needs. And again, I think it's often overlooked by a lot of people, the sacrifices that our soldiers and others make, not just because they're having to be gone, but the sacrifices that their families, the spouses, and the children make as well. But you learn, you learn to accommodate and to make the necessary changes that you do. And for most folks, it works out.
Yeah. Do you remember the worst day you ever had in the military?
I do.
What was that like?
It was actually during my reserve time during the 1991 Gulf War. A lot of Kentucky Guard units were being mobilized and called up. And I'd come home one evening from a very hard day. It was late. I got in the shower, and I hadn't been there just maybe a couple minutes, and I heard the phone ring. And Jennifer, just a minute later, opens the shower door, and she says, "That was your commander." She says, "You need to call immediately." And I'm like, "Okay." And I finished the shower. I got out, and I called the number, and he told me, he said, "We're being alerted for deployment." He said, "You need to contact your people." So I started calling all my officers and my non-commissioned officers and told them, I said, "We need to put our alert plan into effect. We're going to be deployed, being mobilized." And honestly, Debbie, the next several days were kind of a blur, but my phone seemed as if it never stopped ringing. I was getting phone calls from parents, wives, aunts, uncles, brothers, sisters, grandmothers, and grandparents of the men in my unit saying, "Well, what's going on? What is this? What does this mean? What's happening? Are you taking my son to war?" And I'm trying to be as cordial and polite and give as much information as I could. That, well, I don't really know. I just know we're being mobilized, and yes, there's a possibility that we're going to war. And well, my son didn't sign up for that. I don't want my husband to do that. I completely understand that, but that's yes, your son, your husband, and your grandson did sign up for that. That's a part of being a soldier. And so the thing that really weighed heavily on my mind was that we trained hard. We'd always trained for the eventuality that we may be mobilized one day, we may be called up, and that for me, the thought that, or the reality that I may have to actually lead these men into battle, weighed very heavily on me. So for me, that was probably the worst time, and thankfully, we didn't have to deploy. So again, that was a blessing.
Yeah.
But again, as a soldier, that's one of the things that you face, and it is one of the things that you sign up for. Nobody wants to have to go to war, but if it comes, then if you're a soldier, then you know the risk that you may be called and you may be sent, and you accept it, and you go on.
Yeah. Do you remember your best day in the service? A day that just sticks out and you just think, this was the best day ever?
There were probably, I feel fortunate I had a lot of days like that, and I don't know if any one day particularly sticks out, but most of those days usually revolve around my comrades, my fellow soldiers. The things we did, something someone would say or would do that would just kind of maybe break the monotony or lighten the mood a little bit. There were many times when, you were cold, you were hungry, you were hot, you were miserable, and somebody would say something to do something, and it would just kind of make it all worth it. Yeah. So any one particular day, I guess, would be coming back to America after being gone for a couple of years. We flew into Philadelphia, and I remember as we were taxiing up to the terminal, there was this huge American flag. And as we were making our approach in, everybody was talking. There was a lot of smoking, joking, and everybody, because we'd all been over there for a couple of years or longer, some guys. And families, some people had their families on the plane, were coming back, they'd been over there with their families. And there was a lot of banter back and forth, but as the pilot said, we'll be making our approach into Philadelphia, I noticed the plane got very, very quiet. But as we touched down, as we started making our way to the terminal, and you saw that flag, it was so quiet you could almost hear a pin drop. Excuse me. We were all so grateful to be back in this country, our home, that we'd given the years of our lives serving, defending, away from our friends, away from our families. And I guess never really fully understanding until that moment, as we touched down and saw that flag, how much it really meant to us.
Yeah.
So I would say the epitome of my career was that day coming back to America. And that flag, to me, to this day, still means a lot. And I know we've had our faults and we've had our issues, but even with all those, we have been truly blessed.
Yeah.
So that was a great day.
And I think so. It's easy to be critical if you've never been anywhere else.
Absolutely.
I know. I've led several teams to Haiti on mission, and until you go and you see, you never really appreciate what you have.
Yes.
Until you don't have it.
We actually had went over into East Berlin, and at that time the wall, the city was divided, and they had a program called the Troop Train. You could apply to go, and I was selected to go, but we actually traveled into East Berlin, spent a few days. We went to what was known as Checkpoint Charlie. It was the city was divided. You had the communist sector, you had the British and the American sector, and Checkpoint Charlie was where the wall actually come through the city, and you could go there and actually see. You could see over into East Berlin, and the difference between East and West was daylight and dark. The West was bustling; it was active, people going, shopping, working. The East was just drab, nothing, people hardly out, nobody, no traffic hardly. That really opened your eyes as far as being an American, the freedoms that we had, the freedoms we took for granted, to see these people don't have that. And there were places too where they took us where you could actually see, and you may have heard stories if you've read your history, how people from the East risked everything, even death, to flee the oppression, to free the communist regime, to try to get across the wall, to get to freedom, where people would actually machine gun to death trying to escape. That's how brutal, that's how cruel the communist regime was. But people yearning for freedom, and for those people that lived along the wall, that could actually see over into the western side, see that every day and not be able to experience that, and wanting that, and hearing stories. And there was a thing called Radio Free Europe back through the 70s and 80s. I think it's even ongoing today. It's kind of a ministry program. They would broadcast over into these socialist communist countries, and these people could hear things, these programs of what it was like. And I guess just that yearning for freedom, to be able to experience that, to taste that, was so overpowering that they were willing to risk it all. Individuals, even whole families, to have a taste of freedom. Again, like I said, for most of us, that we just so readily take for granted.
Yeah. So. Does it bother you today that some of our history's being dampening.
Absolutely.
Dampened.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. I feel that our history is not to be tampered with. It's not ours to tamper with, because if we try to erase it, then we're never going to learn from it.
Yeah.
And the only way we can be more productive as moving forward as a society is to learn from our history, even the mistakes of our history, so that we never repeat those mistakes again. Let's learn from them and let's move forward and hopefully make ourselves better as a people, better as a nation, and better for the world in which we live.
Yeah. What would you say today to young men and women who are trying to make a decision for their future, whether it be college, work, military? What would you say to them in helping them kind of decide what they may want to do? Because it's very hard at 17 to know what you're going to do. I've never figured it out myself. So what advice would you say to young people today about considering military service?
I would encourage all young people, men and women both, to seriously explore your options. Again, for myself personally, I felt I knew I wanted to go to school eventually. I felt that was important. Education is important. And I did eventually go and finish and receive my degree and things. So, but you may not be ready for that right now. Military service, I think, opens up a variety of options for you to explore, to look at. There are many great programs available. The training is excellent. It's some of the best. It's not that you have to necessarily make a career of it, but it would be a great stepping stone, especially if you feel that maybe you're not ready for college or other things. Maybe, like me, you feel you need some more time to mature, maybe to grow a little bit. Maybe you want to travel. Maybe you want to see other parts of the country and the world. So I would encourage young men and women to seriously look at the military and all the options they provide. Not only is the training excellent, the opportunities are excellent, but the ability to further your education is there. They provide financial aid, great financial opportunities with the GI Bill and things they offer to, again, if you're like me, maybe not in a position to go off to college to afford it financially, maybe your parents are not financially able to do that, the military gives you great options to further your education, not only through them, but after you spend your time and you want to come back out and then start a career, the opportunities are just tremendous. So I would encourage young men and women to seriously consider the military. And again, it goes back to service. What better way to serve others and to serve yourself than by serving your country? Today, the way things are, Debbie, you know as well as I do, the world we live in is way dangerous than it was when we grew up, probably, and is becoming more dangerous every day. So again, the ability for our nation to be able to defend itself is going to rely on our young men and women. And again, the military is not designed for everyone, but it's again something that I would say explore it thoroughly, look at the options, explore all your options, but think highly about that. I think it would be a very rewarding career. I think you would be well pleased with your service, and again, knowing that you were willing to sacrifice a little bit of yourself to serve others, and I think that is a key thing for all of us.
Well, I appreciate you sharing these thoughts with us today, and this is on a side note, which has nothing really to do with military, but I think I heard this about you, and I may be wrong, but I'm going to put it out there. You and your wife, Jennifer, did you at one time travel to like national parks and get little dirt and put it in bottles and bring it back, and then encouraged your sons when they grew up to take it back and put it back?
Yeah, something like that. Places that I went to, different parts of the country, I would gather little pieces of rock and dirt things, and our oldest, it actually goes back to our oldest son Jordan. He loves that. He is actually a park ranger with the National Park Service, and he still has some of those little containers of things, because he would take them and I'd label them. This is from the Mojave Desert. This is from Fort Hood, Texas. This is from Fort Georgia. or Fort Stewart, Georgia, and places. And so, yeah. But
I heard that and I just thought, wow, that would really be an interesting thing that if we traveled and then we encouraged our children to travel.
I've actually
the
brought
same
back some
places.
little pieces of rock and dirt. I know you're not supposed to do this, but we went to Hawaii, and I actually brought a little piece of coral. You know, it's supposed to be, if you do that, it's supposed to be a curse. Thankfully, I don't think there's a curse, but I brought that little piece of coral back. Still have it on my desk. Just a reminder.
Yeah.
You know, but I'll pick up a rock and I put it. Jennifer like, what are you doing with that? I'm like, oh.
Yeah. I'm curious. Were your boys in scouting?
They did scouting for just a short while. Yeah. I think they enjoyed it, but again, we kind of had difficulty getting good scout leaders and keeping good scout leaders. But I think the year or two that they did it, they kind of enjoyed it. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, thanks for your time, and certainly on a short notice. I told you it would be just short notice, but I just really think these kinds of stories are important to be telling, especially in light of the way history is being treated this day and age. And fortunately, we can put this in the cloud and nobody can take that away, I hope. So, but thanks for your time. Thanks for your service to our country and for your service to the church, to God's people. It's just you're a soldier in more ways than one. And I just want to say how much I appreciate that.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share.
Thank you.